The night covered the city with a thick black blanket, absorbing all sounds and blurring the outlines of buildings in the darkness. Unable to sleep, I decided to walk through the familiar streets, hoping that the fresh air would help me calm down. The streetlights barely illuminated, their yellowish light only accentuating the emptiness of the night streets. It seemed as if the whole world had fallen silent, leaving me alone with the darkness. I walked slowly, listening to the gravel crunching under my feet. And then I noticed it. A strange shadow. It was lying on the wall of an old building, its shape unnatural, as if foreign to this world. No light source could explain it. It was simply there, motionless, but filled with invisible life. I took a step back, and the shadow moved too. Something deep inside me suggested that this was not just a play of light. It was watching me. I quickened my pace, but the shadow did not fall behind. It always appeared where I least expected, as if it knew my intentions in advance. When I turned into a narrow alley, I realized that the shadow had gotten there first. My heart clenched with fear. "Who's there?" I shouted, but my voice dissolved into the emptiness. No response. I ran. The streetlights flickered and the shadows merged into a chaotic kaleidoscope, but that shadow stayed close, like an eternal companion. Eventually, I ran out into a wide-lit square. For a moment, it seemed that the shadow had vanished. The feeling of relief washed over me, but not for long. The cold breath of the night sent a chill through my bones. I turned around and saw it. The shadow stood before me, sharp, pulsating, alive. Its contours shifted, as if it were trying to take a form but couldn't. I screamed and ran toward my house. Slamming the door, I gasped for air, pressing against the wall. It seemed the nightmare was behind me. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw it. The shadow was there, behind me. It no longer chased me through the streets. Now, it had become a part of me. The following days turned into a nightmare. The shadow was everywhere. In the reflection of my phone's screen, in the gleam of glass on windows. It was silent, but its presence hung heavily over my life. I searched for answers in books and legends, stumbling upon fragments that only scared me more. The shadow was an ancient being, older than humanity. It chose its victims randomly and never retreated. I found forums where people shared similar stories. They too had seen it, felt the cold and fear. But no one knew how to rid themselves of this horror. I understood that this shadow was not just following me. It forced me to look deep within myself, revealing my deepest fears. One evening, gathering courage, I left the house. The world around me seemed different. The streetlights shone too brightly, and the shadows became unnaturally long. And among those shadows, I saw it again. It stood on the other side of the street, motionless, but clearly alive. Its presence filled my consciousness. I began to hear a whisper that turned into words. It spoke of my fear, loneliness, of the darkness that lived within me. It didn't attack, it only waited for me to understand. I stopped sleeping and eating. My life turned into a shadowy existence. Desperate, I decided to face it head on. On the night of the full moon, I returned to the place where I first saw it. The shadow waited for me. It was enormous, its shape pulsating, as if it were absorbing the very air. "What do you want from me?" I screamed. It didn't answer, but I understood. The shadow was not evil. It was a mirror showing me my fears. To rid myself of it, I had to accept myself, my mistakes, and the darkness inside. Closed my eyes and allowed it to consume me. It became a part of me, but no longer oppressed me. Since then, the shadow has disappeared. But I know it is somewhere nearby, waiting for someone who is not ready to face their fears.